And welcome to the Obeidallah show. Joining us now, it's our buddy Frank Figliuzzi. You know him as a retired 25-year plus service in the FBI, rose to the level of assistant director. He's a best-selling author of various books. His Substack is very popular. I recommend it. I subscribe, called The Frank Figliuzzi. And starting Monday, he's got a brand new online show through Lincoln Square called Need to Know. And we'll talk about that later in the conversation so you can share more. But Frank, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the shameless plug for the new show starting next week.
It's what we do. We're all here to help each other, right? This is the community that we live in now.
Yeah, it is.
Until the Ellisons buy Substack, and then that's the end of this too, because they buy like 20 things. It's unbelievable.
No, we'll just be holding up signs on the street corner at that point.
That's right. You know, we'll tell news for food.
Sure.
Like so let's talk. You know, I emailed you yesterday about coming on was more Iran centric, but now there was news. James Comer went on Fox News last night. James Comer's chair of the House Oversight Committee, very pro-Trumper, but he cannot look away from the real evidence. And the reporting is, I'll read what he said to Jesse Waters. The federal government asked New Mexico to stop their investigation into Epstein back in 2019 of that ranch, the Zorro Ranch. He said there's so many questions about how the government failed, how they failed the victims. And you know what? It's not just speculative. The New York Times on March 1st reported that, but it got buried because we were day 2 of the Iran war. But the New York Times backed up a state-led inquiry into Mr. Epstein's actions were taken over by federal prosecutors in 2019, and it fizzled, and New Mexico officials were reaching out to DOJ going, what's going on? No response. So, Frank, I want to get your reaction out right off the top.
Wow. So I got to tell you, this is a bit of a head scratcher. Having led FBI field offices and programs, when you tell a state to back off of an investigation, you've either got a posture where you've got it all covered, right? And you just can't afford to have any interference in it at that point, sensitive, what have you. Maybe, there's some classified things going on. Just generically telling you, in my experience, what would cause me to tell a state investigation to back off. Number two, you've got such national security concerns wrapped up in your investigation that the clearances are things you don't even want to provide to the state investigators, and they don't need to know. That's been my experience in telling state, local, county, back off. So let's explore that. Number one, was the FBI all over this? Absolutely no evidence of that happening, and in fact, quite the contrary. Number two, could there be a level of national security sensitivity and classification here that would have caused the Bureau to tell the state to back off? Wow, here we go with potential conspiracy theories about Epstein is this more evidence that he was an operative for the U.S. intelligence or allied intelligence community? What is going on? So let's ask a rhetorical question. Who was president when the FBI told New Mexico to back off?
Donald Trump, of course.
Well, so what in God's name is going on? And look, we have to give, although I can't stomach most of what James Comer stands for, we have to give him at least an ounce of credit for coming out publicly and saying, my God, the DOJ told the state of New Mexico to stop investigating the ranch. And he seems to be genuinely perplexed, and I am too.
No, I think I watched the clip on Fox News. I mean, it was online, and I'm like, he was really like, this has got to be done. And Jesse Waters then pressed him because Comer said the administration at the time, and he didn't say who. And Waters like, who? And he goes, well, it was the Department of Justice, and obviously it was under Donald Trump. So, but there was other report. I mean, Frank, I am the anti-conspiracy person. If you have a conspiracy, you come to me, you're going to be upset with me, right?
Yeah, me too.
This is not a conspiracy. What we know now, so New Mexico opened up that Truth Commission. It's bipartisan. 100, everyone in the state legislature, Democrat and Republican, voted for it. A state assembly person who's one of the leaders of the committee came forward yesterday to the press talking about they're getting complaints from people who said that they woke up at the Zorro Ranch and organs were missing or there was surgery. There was reporting back to a 2019 article I read just before we came on, New York Times 2019, right after Epstein's arrested, he's still alive. And this is not disputed stuff, that he was in this transhumanism thing where they were gathering organs and he wanted to implant his seed in 20 women at a time. And you're like, what was going on What don't we know? Like, how much more darker and sinister could this have been? And it already was horrific.
Well, again, both of us lawyers, both of us fact-based people.
Right.
But by God, Dean, we are at war right now. And yes, there's a myriad of reasons why we may be at war, although it changes every 15 minutes.
Right.
Um, I'm increasingly convinced that this is a bright, shiny object to have us talk less about Epstein. And James Comer's having none of that.
Right.
And so what's next? Absolutely, we must implore our lawmakers to hold the hearings that bring in the state of New Mexico people. I've been saying this for a long time. Where are the FBI personnel, whether they were from the New Mexico field office or at headquarters or New York, whoever's had the lead on this? In 2019, it's New York. So I want to hear from those agents and managers. Who told you to tell the state of New Mexico to stop investigating this and why? What was the reason? Same thing for New Mexico officials. Why, who, where, when? We need all of it done, and we can't stop talking about it until we have answers.
I agree with you. I cannot believe what we're seeing, Frank. I mean, we're seeing with Epstein. I didn't know much about him, honestly, before, even when he got arrested. I didn't follow that closely. I thought a little, I knew he was a sex offender and a child rapist and all that kind of stuff. But what we're learning now in the last couple of years was far beyond anything I ever knew. That there was a whole other world with rich and powerful men that were getting away, and I'm sure Democrat and Republican. This is not partisan. Being going to get young girls or children or women and be trafficked to them, and now we're seeing. So we've learned about the biggest sex scandal, child rape scandal in our lives, and now we're seeing a cover up in real time. And what I mean by that, Frank, there's over 1,000 victims. They are at hearings clamoring for justice, and DOJ will prosecute zero, zero. It doesn't even make sense in my brain. Like, I can't understand how we could be at this place as a nation.
Yeah, again, you know me, I took a long time to use the term you just used, cover up, but I've been using it liberally now. There's no question in my mind we're dealing with a significant cover up, that other nations are way ahead of us in terms of trying to do the right thing. Now, you may say, well, Prince Andrew, the Andrew formerly known as Prince, needs to go to prison or this or that. But look, folks, people are being removed from their positions, stepping down from powerful jobs in the corporate and academic arena. Andrew's likely to be completely removed from the succession planning of the royal family. And we are doing absolutely zero other than a little committee that's Republican controlled in Congress. And it's left to crowdsourcing, people like you and I going through millions of documents being released in dribs and drabs by DOJ, trying to find something. And every day is a new revelation, like we just had with Congressman Comer. Look, this is only going to cause. Often this administration is their own worst enemy. If indeed there's nothing there,
Mhm.
just God darn come out and go, look, we'll give you all the stuff that just involves Trump. We want to protect other people. We're going to get sued, blah, blah, blah. But here's the stuff just on Trump. And it's not that bad. See, but we're not even getting that. If it's not a cover up, tell us why you told New Mexico to stop. And I'll predict this right now. Pam Bondi's going to try to say, Dean, that it was so incredible, non-credible, non-verifiable, the allegations around the ranch, that we told New Mexico to stop wasting your time. I'll bet you we're going to try.
That's
She's going to
ridiculous.
try that.
I really encourage people to check out the articles about what's going on in New Mexico. They just began, and I'm going to ask Frank about it now. They on Monday and Tuesday of this week, the last 2 days, the police now in New Mexico and the attorney general's will open an investigation, have swarmed the ranch. It's not owned by Epstein anymore. The current owner said, yes, come on in. It's massive property, and they're looking all over the place. And the question is, can you still find something? I mean, it's changed hands. There's a new owner. Um, is there a chance you can find some evidence relevant?
There's always a chance. There are things like, so for example, with regard to allegations, let's go with the ground and allegations that there may be bodies literally buried there. I have seen cadaver dogs do incredible work, even delayed over time, and still find human remains. Do they get sometimes confused with animal remains? Yes, but boy, they're remarkably good. I've been present when they have found a body that we simply could not have found. Let's talk about ground penetrating radar. Think of it as an ultrasound for your backyard.
Wow.
So, whether the Earth has been, the Earth might by now has grown over and all of that looks fine, but this ground penetrating technology can find disruptions in the Earth and gaps and holes beneath the soil. Are you going to find false positives? Yes. Did somebody bury a dog in the backyard? Maybe Christy known. But you can do that. And then the best I've seen of the FBI's evidence response teams is archaeological style forensic digs, where it's like watching, some archaeologists on a dig for dinosaurs. They literally use brushes and get down into the soil, and it's expensive. Will the FBI do that when they told New Mexico to stop? Or are we going to rely on the state of New Mexico? I know nothing about their forensic capabilities on archaeology digs. Is New Mexico willing to pay for professional archaeologists to do a dig? I don't know, but the short answer to your question is absolutely, you can still find evidence.
And one last thing on this before we move on to another topic. So the Trump administration, through the Southern District of New York, which was handling the investigation here in New York in 2019, tells New Mexico stop. They do indict Jeffrey Epstein. So they're the first ones on the federal level to indict him. Alex Acosta made the sweetheart deal, and it was state charges years before that. So you've got, well, you might say, well, the Trump administration did prosecute him, but I wonder, Trump prosecutes him, and here's a little speculation. Did they prosecute him to keep him quiet because you're going to a reelection campaign? Because when I say that, that has a little basis in fact, are the emails show Epstein talking to Ghislaine and others going, I know everything about Trump. Like, why are they talking to that person? I'm the guy that knows everything. And I'm wondering if DOJ's hearing this and they go, and someone says, we got to protect Donald Trump. He's running for reelection. Let's put him in jail. And then, of course, he just dies. You know, I know there's speculation there.
No, Dean, I know. I cannot rule that out. I cannot rule out, quote unquote prosecution that may have never gotten to the trial phase, with intent to never get there. Look, I feel that way about Maduro that we grabbed out of Venezuela. If I were a betting man, and I know Kashi is under tremendous publicity and controversy right now with people winning bets on $500,000 gamble that
Right.
Ayatollah's going to die or not die. But I'm telling you, I don't know if Maduro's ever going to see an actual trial. I don't. I think a deal.
Interesting. You heard it
Yeah,
here from Frank Figliuzzi. If
yeah,
something happens to Maduro,
yeah.
you know what happened. When you
Well,
say Cash, it's funny. When you said Cashy, I thought it was a pet name for Cash Patel.
no,
And I
no, no, no.
realized it's the platform that you bet
It's the
gamble.
betting
I
platform.
honestly, I'm like Cashy.
No.
What is going on here? All right, so it was
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
all right, Frank. Let's shift gears. I want to touch base on Iran. One is a potential blowback on our soil, which everyone's concerned about, of course. But the second is, and you don't have access to classified information, so you can give any answer. There's nothing to worry about. But Senator Richard Blumenthal came out from the briefing on Monday and said two alarming things. One is we're on the path to putting boots on the ground.
Yeah.
There's no way to achieve the goals. So that's a different component. The second, he said Russia is helping Iran. We had seen some reporting, and he said really helping them. He couldn't go further. And he said it looks like China might be helping them as well. Anything you've seen, anything you can shed a light on what might be going on?
Well, again, public source only. Let's talk about ground troops first. Start looking for whether or not we're seeing a massing of infantry or even special operators, which would be very difficult to actually detect. I would expect the first to go in would be special operators like Delta Force or SEAL, depending on where we are. But watch for that. Watch for the movement of their bodies, their aircraft, into staging areas that could be anywhere from Eastern Europe to Germany to other places where they're ready to stage. They've got to move. They just can't jump out of airplanes and do it. Okay, that's ground troops. With regard to China and Russia, I think it's quite clear now from experts that Iran by itself does not possess the kind of advanced satellite technology that leads to the precision guided missile attacks that we're seeing. For example, in Saudi Arabia at the US Embassy, the portion of the US Embassy that was destroyed was the CIA station.
Wow.
that kind of precision, the experts are saying in writing, is Russia or someone else, but not Iran. And so I think that's there. There's been credible reporting that China also is providing some kind of technology or material as well. That's to be expected. What's not to be expected, Dean, is that here we are in 2026, and our president still thinks Russia is a friend, and and Putin's his buddy, and we're not helping Ukraine. And we had a chance to totally erode and degrade the Russian military, and we're choosing not to do it in Ukraine. And here we are fighting a proxy war with Russia to a degree, but it's Iran. And that's what's killing me. That this president still thinks Russia's our friend.
It's remarkable because and also common sense is we've been helping Ukraine kill Russian troops. I would only imagine they would salivate at the opportunity to return that favor to us and kill US troops wherever they are. So if it gets to the next level and there's US troops on the ground, you have to fear what Russia will do, especially because Trump is waiving the restriction on Russian oil being sold, and Russian oil and oil is like at the high it's been in years. So now Russia's making a windfall on this. That's all real. And you mentioned proxy wars. If people haven't not followed too much the Middle East, proxy wars are a staple of the Middle East. In Syria, there was a proxy war. In Yemen, there was a proxy war. We have our people we arm. Russia has theirs. Iran has theirs. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. So the difference is
Afghanistan.
right. So the difference is we are fighting directly in Iran. Generally, we're backing some militia group like Yemen against the Houthis, and in Syria we had our own people we were backing, of course, and that shifts over time. So this is different. We don't know how this can end, but how concerned are you? I know there was concerns of on U.S. soil that Iran would commit some act of terrorism, but Iran is just they're a rational actor. They're not irrational. They have to understand if they did some kind of small 9/11 on U.S. soil, that would cause people like me who don't like this war to go, okay, we're in. Let's do this. That kind of stuff. So is it more likely that it's a lone wolf inspired by what's going on? Or do you think there's actually potential that Iran as a nation would sponsor terrorism on our soil right now?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, it's all of the above. The hardest to detect and to mitigate, is the lone actor for sure. It pops up. They're often not on your radar screen, and even if they are, you certainly don't have them under 24-hour surveillance. Although I'm sure our intel community and law enforcement is going 24/7 right now, trying to cover everybody, and they can't possibly do it. The bad guy only has to get it wrong once. The Bureau has to get it right every single day. The odds are against them. With regard to terrorists on U.S. soil or even Western soil, you're looking at the IRGC's Quds Force, which is their external actor for violent acts, extremely well equipped and trained. And you're looking at possible Hezbollah sleeper agents, which reportedly the Bureau and DHS have been warning law enforcement about. And a signal reportedly has been sent that's encoded, that's being interpreted as alerting sleeper cells to activate. That's been reported publicly. Okay. Sadly, the Bureau has taken in years past, the Bureau, in looking at its priorities and resources, has decided to kind of pull the plug on most of its Hezbollah investigations in the United States. They weren't seeing the bomb throwers. They were seeing couriers. They were seeing financial cases, and they were like, "Look, we've turned it upside down and shaken it, and we don't see the actors here, the violent actors." That's bad news because we may have taken our eye off the ball. So what do I think is going to happen? Number one, yeah, the individual lone wolf. Number two, likely not capable of a big iconic act. Number two, cyber is a huge threat.
Okay.
They're very good at cyber attacks, and I think they're in keeping with what you said. Hey, are they concerned about pissing off the American public? Yes. So I think the targets of cyber are going to be far more defense sector, government sector, that kind of thing. And then with regard to violent acts and terrorism, I think again they're very livid with all of the government actors. They're going to try to hurt people like Trump and his cabinet, Hegseth, all of that. The security on them has got to be on steroids right now because I think they're the target.
Yeah, I just saw, you may have seen it, Pam Bondi's, she might be living at a military base or she's moving to a military
I
base.
saw that.
And she was saying it was because of cartels and the Epstein files, but I imagine it could have something to do with this. And I have no problem with that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's closer to the prison where they're going to go to one day. No, that's my dream. So, Frank, I saw reporting two different inconsistent reportings in my view. One is warnings going out to local officials
Yeah.
that U.S. intelligence community issued a flurry of private warnings to American companies, government agencies to be vigilant. Then I saw another reporting where it said here the White House reportedly halted a federal security bulletin warning law enforcement across the U.S. of a heightened threat potentially tied to the conflict with Iran.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. Can they be both correct?
I saw that. I reported it. It was you're referring to, I believe, a Daily Mail
Yeah.
report. And I said to my viewers when I talked about it, I don't usually rely on the Daily Mail. It's not a paper of record, but they literally said they had their hands on the alert and they quoted from it. So that is significant. So what's going on? Possibly could be that there was so much of a stink about the possibility that the government is pulling back and not allowing alerts to go out that they decided to let some other more polished version come out.
Okay.
The other possibility is that there's something inside that particular alert that caused people to panic and say, we can't put that out. It's too sensitive, or it's going to cause the American people to flip out. That's possible as well. So yes, both can be true. And I don't have an answer to reconcile the two, that we're getting these reports, but we're not getting that report.
Right. But there's no doubt there's a heightened alert right now across the country, and it makes sense. I mean, we're at war. We're devastating a country in Iran. I mean, some of the images are look a little bit like mini Gaza, not overall, not like that, but pockets of it. You're like, wow, I don't know how you're winning the hearts and minds of people when you're destroying apartment buildings. I'm not even talking about the school, but the apartment buildings, hospital was hit, a UNESCO site. The air is so filled with toxics from the oil in the air. I'm like, this is how you're going to win the people over. You're trying to win the people. This is not a war like Iraq. It's different.
Yeah. We are creating a humanitarian crisis. You're right about toxic air. You cannot breathe that stuff in. Not to mention the fuel from missiles and the explosives, the oil fields aflame, going through the infrastructure. You see these apocalyptic videos of flames coming out of the sewers and the drainage because it's penetrated the underground. And yes, the the Iranian people are going, hey, I thought you were here to help. Apparently not.
Yeah, we're not. So last thing, and then we'll touch on the new show you're doing for Lincoln Square. Need to know. Look, it's not getting. I'm not sure if it's making national headlines, but I live in New York City, and there's a lot of press about these two Pennsylvania teenagers, 18 and 19, both Muslim, charged with being inspired by ISIS to throw these sort of homemade bombs. And there's a lot of questions about it. I'm not saying it's not true. It's true, and they were charged, and there's footage of that. But these guys from Pennsylvania came to an event in New York, which I live in New York. I don't even live far from Gracie Mansion. It was not getting a lot of press, this anti-Muslim rally. And so they went to go, apparently they went to throw the bomb at the anti-Muslim guys it was like 20 of them.
Yeah.
And I talked to people in the mayor's administration because I was at an event that 2 days later, and the lawyers are there like, this doesn't make sense to us. We don't know what's going on. Who would have helped these guys who don't know anything, how to make a bomb like this, how to drive here? The reporting is they two suspects drove from Pennsylvania in some borrowed car from an associate, according to NBC News. So people raised the idea, was there a government informant involved that pushed them along? We don't know. I'm just saying, what is your take on this? I'm not suggesting it's true. They were saying that. They're like, what is going on?
I share your frustration with the scenario here, not really making a lot of neat sense. But a couple of things. One, you're hearing the NYPD commissioner refer to these guys being inspired, but not radicalized. That's an interesting distinction. And it's really because they've apparently been watching violent jihadist videos.
Right.
And maybe that includes the sermons from violent clerics. And look, I can tell you, when I was leaving the bureau, Dean, we were seeing what's called the speed to radicalization go down to 9 weeks from the point a young person starts watching violent jihadist sermons and videos to the point they're willing to act out. It was down to 9 weeks. So that's one observation. Number two, the difference between radicalized, meaning you're going to be a bomb thrower, and you're being directed, instructed, and you've got some direct or indirect contact with leadership of a terrorist cell. We're not seeing that here yet. You've raised an interesting possibility about whether an associate who lent his car might or might not be an informant for the government. That's got to come out if that's the case, and that's your worst nightmare as an agent. I can tell you that for sure. Number two, if people are saying, "Hey, is this linked to Iran or not?" A couple of thoughts. One, as you know, ISIS, which is what they say inspired them, is Sunni Salafi, and ISIS believes that Shiites in Iran are heretics. So it's not that there's this bond that's going to cause them to act out on behalf of Iran, but rather, as you said, this was an anti-Muslim demonstration, small, 25 people. There were 100 counter protesters.
Right.
And somehow this got on their radar screen. And I can tell you this, the Bureau, the NYPD is going to go through all of their devices, figure out how they got inspired, figure out how they found out about this protest, and then hopefully let us know this was a one-off, or worse, this is the beginning of something else.
Yeah, I mean, and these guys, they're really young guys. They didn't, I saw the image. The one guy lit it and he dropped it, and the cops are like 10 feet from him looking at him. And they're like, what are you? The cops didn't even run away. They're like, what are you doing? Because the guy looked like a young idiot, like a kid. He's 18,
Well,
a kid. And they're just, and they didn't throw it at the cops. One threw it and yelled, Allah Akbar. The others, like, you see images, it's on the ground. The cops are looking like, what is that? You can see that. I'm like, what is happening here?
Thank God they screwed up.
I know. I agree. Thank God indeed. Yeah.
One of the devices reportedly had TATP, triacetone triperoxide. The choice, the bombing of preference, the explosive of preference for terrorists, because the speed of detonation, Dean, is 3,000 to 5,000 meters per second. So the bolts and screws they had in there would have sliced through people, much like the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yeah, and they did cite the Boston Marathon bombing, according to the DA or the prosecutors or the police commissioner, that they wanted to kill more than Boston Marathon, which was 3 people killed.
They could have. They could have.
So last thing, Frank, tell us about Lincoln Square. Need to know, your new show that's debuting this Monday.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So, if you go to my Substack, the Frank Figliuzzi, or my YouTube, you're going to be, or Lincoln, you're a subscriber to Lincoln Square. By the way, you don't need to pay to see this show, but once a week, starting next week, we're going to do a show. I'll have guests many weeks, some great guests, and we'll get deep into the news cycle. So if you're overwhelmed by the news cycle, we're going to cut through the chaos, cut through the confusion, and get to what you need to know. Hence the name, Need to Know.
That's good. It's a very good title. Need to Know, Lincoln Square. And they're great people, Sam and Susan. I was just on with both of them on Monday on their show. So I like them. And Susan's been on my show a few times. Well, Frank, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us live here. I wish I could have read the chat while it was going, but sometimes I do these alone and I just read the comments and we talk together. But when a guest is on, I got to focus. But thank everyone for joining. The Frank friends, my friends. Have a great day. I look forward to chat with all of you early in the future. Take care, brother.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.